Player Will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. She's been here for about a week, but this is the full character review for Yuna, the brand new light unit added as part of the Final Fantasy X-2 collaboration that is ongoing for the next 30 days or so. And today's character review, pretty standard things. It's the overview. We'll look at the stats, the report card, general thoughts. If you've been following me for any period of time, you know exactly how these go. But kicking things off here, she is a brand new light unit added to the game with the unique main job of Gunner X-2. With the Sniper and Trick Lancer subjobs, she does equip guns for job-based vision card purposes, and yes, she is a missile attack unit that scales off her attack stats, so a physical damage dealing unit. She equips hats, cloths, and accessories with a move of 3, but it's technically a 2 because in auto PvP in most forms of the game, you will likely have her main passive on, which does reduce her move by 1. So for most intents and purposes, you can think of her of a move 2 unit with a jump of 1, so regular jump, as a 100 cost unit. And my faith stat recommendation is 50 faith. There's really not a whole lot that I see the upside for in going higher. I could see some niche cases, and we'll talk about that in the ability section, but for now I think 50 is fine. Now the max range, there's always an asterisk on this because her abilities innately are 5 squares away. It really just comes down to how many range +1s or +2s you have equipped on her, where she's got 1 in her kit innately that you'll almost always have on, but she does have a buff to extend it by 2. And her Trial of Reckoning item also increases it by 1. So this is going to shift a whole lot. So this max range going to be something to think through. There's 1 AoE ability and 3 single target abilities on her main job. From a resistance perspective, the negative 10% to strike is really the only negative, and that's kind of usual for a lot of these units we've seen as of late. The rest of them actually pretty decent, double digits of 15% and 10% to slash, missile, and magic. Neutral at 0% to pierce. The ailment resistances, again, 50 faith, so you want to be cognizant of these, but it's not the end of the world. 50% to blind is actually really nice considering the Sottily meta that we're seeing at the moment, and even some of the future Riku use, where her TMR has a blind effect on it that's kind of similar to the Vega TMR, that you can inflict blind on people. She's also at 50% to disable, which is certainly great for all the Lucille and even some of the Agrius that we're seeing, and the 10% to paralysis, kind of nice, but I don't say that as often. Now for the mastery ability, they gave her 15 accuracy, which is all through her kit. 20 crit damage, also really important for not only her damage, but the follow-up damage she does. And the 140 ability is really big, that it's 15% wide resistance for both physical and magic type attacks. 30% reaction block right there as well. Now getting into some of the stats of things, overall, in a pretty decent spot, considering again she's a missile unit for what she has for base stats. She's really similar to what Ice Jaden saw a couple weeks ago when he came out. The HP certainly not as high innately as we're used to seeing with some of these bruiser units, but as far as missile units go, this holds up, I think, with all the new power creep of what we're seeing. The attack stat, again, not the highest bucket, but that's usually not true for missile units either. A lot of their damage comes from crit damage and from dexterity scaling, things which, on that note, her dexterity is exceptionally high. That's going to help her crit rate, and it is a part of her damage formula, so that number does kind of help out a little bit with some of these lower base other numbers. The luck stat itself is in a higher bucket. It's not exactly as high as some of the other units that we've seen, but overall in a good spot at 184. And the total stats, they give her a ton of agility on the board here, but overall, this chart on the right, the total stats, really no weaknesses that stick out to me. Again, the attack stat is only one component of what their total damage is. You got to think of like penetrations and imperils and the crit damage component. There's a whole lot of things that go into that, but overall I'm pretty happy with where she comes out with total stats overall. Even the luck stat they give her is relatively generous here, giving her 95 luck to really help her with that total luck, which is going to help her accuracy more than anything. Now the agility, this is really one of her strong points. I would call her virtually the fastest character in the game if you're using the 15% and 8% vision cards. Changes a little bit if you go to 18%, but overall she's at around 85 agility innately, up to that 91 or 92 when you equip her passive, which you will have on most of the time. So for all intents and purposes, she is virtually tied for the fastest characters in the game. Really great thing for her overall. The other stats, that innate critical hit rate, she does have, I believe, 15% crit rate on her board. Overall puts her in a really good starting spot. The critical avoidance rate, kind of par for the course. There's really nothing special in her kit to help address that. The accuracy, though, she is quite literally almost off the charts. She is substantially higher than what I have for other characters when it comes to accuracy. Not only innately, but she does have a passive that you can equip, which will jettison her to the top of what you'll see in practical play. Now, technically, I think Tifa is still, from Advent Children, the most accurate character, but in order to get her there, you have to put together two passives that frankly, you really just wouldn't see all that often. So technically, I don't know if Yuna has the title of the most accurate character, but I think for like what you're expected to see, I think that's pretty safe to say. And the evasion, she is technically on this gradient of what could be considered pseudo-evade, but with the overall accuracy power creep that we've seen, I don't think this is nearly as strong as it was 6 months ago when we saw units like Joom come out in that same evasion tier, if you will. Now, the overall report card, effective HP, again, it's a missile unit. She's a little bit brittle. She's got that wide res, which is certainly nice. I'm sorry, there was a typo. She has no unit res, no AoE res. It's just the AoE wide resistance there. And so a little bit brittle, at least compared to some of the other units, but she does have a physical and magical honeycomb there at that 4 to 6 range of 4% for each tile between 4 and 6. So that's something. To me, the biggest thing is the fact that she's re-raise capable and can seal re-raise removal, which basically gives her a full extra hit of getting hit by something. She does get 20% all element res on the buff, so the survivability does help her a little bit from where that effective HP is, but she is relatively brittle. You'll see her die in 2 to 3 hits. I think that's pretty normal. That's really where the range advantage comes in. Now, the overall damage for me is an A-. There's really no innate missile penetration. There is 30 on her limit break, but it's dispellable. We'll go through that soon. The overall damage takeaway for me is that she does pop off. She's got some good damage buff. She's got enough crushes. She's got enough unit res penetration on her main passive that I feel like damage is very solid for her. The agility is an A+, as we saw, tied for among some of the fastest in the game. The accuracy to me is worthy of an S, because I do see Yuna having opportunities where she will have that very, very high accuracy. For me, she is the bar, the highest, pragmatically speaking, in the game. The evasion could be pseudo-evade, but when you have the real evade incoming, like Riku and Venera, people are going to all of a sudden be building a ton of accuracy into their builds so that they can hit the top-tier evasion in the game. When that happens, all of these pseudo-evade units basically don't evade anything. Because if people are gearing to hit much higher evade levels than what Yuna can achieve, then the evade is going to be worthless. So while it's kind of there, I don't see it in the short term with what's coming out. The movement's a B. The move -1 on the passive is very nice. The auto ease of use is a B-. I wouldn't say it's super easy, because again, per usual, the move -1, figuring out the range +1s, and every time a map changes, how does that affect when you engage in those fights? So that can be a little bit troublesome. The follow-up buff goes to the unit with the highest haste, so you got to make sure they're spaced properly if you wanted to put it on another DPS as opposed to like a tank, for instance. But overall, I do think she's kind of straightforward, so it's not as complicated as I think Jaden was. But I will say Game Disruption is an A. She just throws gasoline on whatever Jaden can do, and Missile is not only a very compelling play versus Sadali and Exia, but also will be in the future evade metas as well because of what her accuracy is. The passives, to me, are an A. Every single passive seemingly has a place. There's some that are obviously better than others, but really nailed it with their passives. The counter ability is honestly not bad. It's a decent heal back. It's a slightly lower proc rate at 20% chance to proc, but it recovers 30% of her health when it does. I like that. The overall jobbing kit for me, though, is an A, where she's very self-sufficient, really good utility overall, and does bring some interesting mitigation removal to enemies that not every character has. We'll talk about that on the next slide. The final grade for me is an A. Brings a lot to the table. Still kind of squishy compared to some of the units that we're used to seeing, but I obviously do think that it is still balanced at the moment for what she does offensively, where she is a little more of a glass cannon, and that's not to say she dies to everything in one hit. She certainly can take 2 to 3 hits, and that re-raise and the re-raise seal certainly extends it a little bit. Not even talking about the fact if you have a healer with you, what that can do if you get the timing right. But yeah, overall final grade's an A. And just some general thoughts just around the missile penetration conversation. She does get the 30 on her limit break, but that is dispellable, and limit breaks are only one-time use, so while it's there, it's not really there as consistently as some others. There's no gun vision cards with penetration on it at this time. There's no espers at the moment that have any kind of penetration for it either. Although I don't think it's a pragmatic downside, because I don't expect people to suddenly stack like, 50% missile resistance, not when you have these strong magic teams and strong slash teams. But technically it can be hard countered, so if there was never an instance where missile got way out of whack and people suddenly were gearing for a lot of missile resistance, Yuna would certainly suffer a little bit from it. The follow-up mechanic for me, though, is very good, but it's not broken. She can only use it on one teammate at a time, and basically she just casts it on them so that when the teammate attacks, Yuna, regardless of where the teammate is, will follow up on whatever attack they did. It's good damage, but I've seen it be really variable. I've seen it be as low as like 2,500 and as high as like 8,000. It really does depend if you're getting that critical hit or not. For me, the defense penetration is her biggest weakness in this, where I think most often you're likely going to be at 50 defense pen for her, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but some of the other follow-up attackers that we're used to seeing maybe sometimes get a little bit higher more regularly. And just for honorable mention, the follow-up removal, if you are removing it with someone like Summer Resnick, needs to hit the attacker, not Yuna. Pretty sure that's what I saw in the test. Now, again, her accuracy potential, absolutely bonkers, going to be big going forward. Her Trials of Reckoning item coming out in a week or two, also very important for that range +1, where she does get a range increase on her second buff of range +2, and although she has range +1 on the main passive, it's just slightly less innately than what some other gunner units get. It's not a good or bad thing, more just an observation. I do love her, though, for the enormous amount of current meta utility, where she can, at range, remove haste on hit. And this is not only for her, but for her teammates. You can null CT changes on hit, so all of these CT up that you're seeing, you can just prevent that from happening at all. You can dispel re-raise on one of her attacks to enemies. You can also, and this is what I was talking about with the mitigation removal earlier, she can remove honeycombs and protect 2.0. And yes, that is honeycomb barriers, both physical and magic. So for someone like Jaden, that actually helps him out too. One of the few characters in the game that can remove those kinds of mitigations. And the healing power of 20 certainly helps. It's not amazing. Every little bit helps, though. Like I said, she's kind of squishy. The reincarnations, if you decide to go that route with this unit, won't help the squishiness, but I do think it will help her accuracy and her damage in a big way, where not only will the attack and the dexterity help a lot, but when it comes to the follow-up damage, her attack stat basically goes directly into that follow-up damage. That is a pretty good increase for her follow-up damage. I can't say exactly, but this is the kind of unit, kind of like Jaden, you might want to take them to like 30 or 40 reincarnations and just hope to get a couple really lucky rolls on some of the primary stats like accuracy or crit hit rate or dexterity or attack magic. The final thing, the gun vision cards do need some work, but Yuna and another missile unit and a support is a great team. We're already seeing right now how effective it can be. Now for the should you pull, it's a maybe, and this is a really simple decision tree for me. Did you pull Jaden? If the answer is yes, get Yuna. Jaden and Yuna, you just ship them right now because they're perfect for each other. If you did not pull Jaden, then skip Yuna. It's really that simple. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't pull her if you don't have Jaden, because she is still a very strong newer light unit that combos well with other light units. If you want to go Cloud or White Lotus Pheno, or even if you have Lilith, Veritas of the Light is being built out by many people right now. And so for newer players, she's not my favorite PvE unit, but she's got a ton of chains in her kit that she will be very good for newer accounts for PvE content, and her utility does go beyond just what she does for missile units. When she increases your damage by 20%, that's good on everybody, not just missile units. When she gives someone like Cloud a follow-up capability, that's still great for when Cloud attacks someone, that unit will follow up on Cloud's attack. So she's not just stuck with missile teams. It's just that her and Jaden are really in an amazing synergy together. That being said, though, there are some easy ways to counter her going forward. First and foremost is just the map selection. Right now, we've got some really favorable missile maps, but the moment that Gumi decides to make these maps smaller again all of a sudden, we can't really control that. Yuna might be on the way out when they do that. And the other thing is just the missile resistance component too. I'm not really afraid of that, but that is a way to hard counter her technically. There's not a lot of units at the moment that have very high missile resistance. They've kind of lowered that over time with all these new units that came out, but there's still enough espers and equipment that you can still get it back up there. Same with some of the vision cards. And in general, the debuff weakening is too, where, you know, that 20 healing power down is greatly cut when you debuff weakening it, but even her unit crush, the 60% unit crush, is greatly decreased depending on how much debuff weakening you have as well. Now, I do just want to, breeze through some of the kit at the moment. These top two passives are the one that you're going to have on 99% of the time for auto PvP. When you start encountering these really hard evade metas, you'll likely swap this second one down for the Unwavering Javelineer, where that's the accuracy of 25. You can make up for this range +1 with her Trial of Reckoning item, which is why it's so important. But realistically, these other passives aren't bad either. Trick Lancer Lore for that crit rate and defense pen, certainly another viable type. You're just trading off the survivability and the agility for her, which I don't think is a great trade-off, but it's certainly there, and that's definitely 2 thumbs up for what they have for a potential passive. And not gonna lie, I actually like the Unwavering Javelineer for her Trick Lancer sub-job, which we're going to talk about in just a couple slides. Now for the counter abilities, I do like Auto Potion. I really wouldn't lean into any of the other ones. I don't think they give her any real upside, but just the ability to maybe get some of that 30% HP back of her total health bar, I like that a lot. We get to the main job buffs. Her main buff is this very large diamond, where that's all those things I was talking about before with the utility. It's also the 20% element res for her. The second buff is the one where she'll go to a teammate, the one with the highest hate that's in range, and she'll bestow the follow effect on them, but will also on herself, the teammate, bestow the re-raise seal, the CT nullification seal. It's the range +2 for herself, and also 10 AP recovery on crit hit for 4 turns. A lot to really like there. From the main job offensive abilities, she is scaling 100% attack stat, 35% of her dexterity stat, and 10% of her luck are in the damage equation for like where her attack stat starts off. The abilities overall, again, very unit oriented, but she's got, I didn't even talk about it, I'm so sorry, the 40 unit res pen here on the main passive is absolutely enormous, not only for the follow-up damage, but for these select twos as well, where not only do you have the crush, where it's got the extra 30% hit chance, it's also a guaranteed critical hit, and it's a piercing type attack, so it can go through multiple enemies. But the rest of these, I mean, the shearing shot is awesome for those very unique mitigation removals. Removal shot is absolutely awesome for the dispel re-raise, even though it's one of her AoEs. I think this kit's overall very balanced. The limit break itself, also really great. It's a quadruple hit. That's also the CT up for herself. I don't see her open with this quite often. I do see her typically using one of these main abilities first, but late in the fight, or even starting off a second fight if you have a tankier character, you can't underrate the chain damage that she and Jaden can pull off once you start stacking these, particularly with the CT, and if she's hasted by Lucille. If you start lapping enemies and building these chains, that is a 20 to 40% extra damage. She does technically have access to the Holiday Party Vision card, though, because of the Trick Lancer sub-job, which is an excellent PvE thing for her to have, that she can gain access to a triple hit. You won't use this in the auto PvP quite often, but for PvE content, this is a major thumbs up for her. In terms of the sub-jobs, this one I think is fair. I don't love Double Trouble. You're really only using this in manual play, or unless you just give up on her accuracy and she can't hit the target at all, that she'll opt to use this. The Cheap Shot is fine as a way to cleave through high defense units, so maybe as like a slight tank buster, but I'll be honest, not my favorite. And even the Sniper sub-job, this one's not bad. I have this on at the moment because I do like the physical barrier break and the reduced counter chance. I think this ability alone, particularly because it's a ranged shot that has some trajectory, as a gunner unit, they typically have to shoot line of sight and have direct view of their enemy. This adds a little bit of versatility to how she can attack, but I'm not gonna lie, I actually like the target buff here as well. It's actually one of her lower priority buffs. You won't see her use it quite often in most Guild War maps. It's really only on the very long maps, which is like at buff 3 or 4 that she'll use this. But I actually like this one too for the extra range and the defense pen more than anything for the follow-up attack. So I really like this Sniper sub-job. That being said, I think Trick Lancer is sneaky good too, just for the Binding Javelin. Same kind of a theory here, where this is a ranged trajectory shot. It's the same distance, it's 5 squares away as the abilities in her main kit, so I don't think she's going to use this over the missile attacks, because the missile attacks get the range +1. This does not, but in the instance that you upgrade her accuracy, this also increases the range of this to 6 squares away, where you get that chance to immobilize. It's a much higher healing power down. I actually think this is an interesting play for units that have some negative pierce resistances, and right now I don't recommend going 97 Faith, and obviously there's a lot of immobilized resistance in the game right now, so I think a lot of people are geared against the status effect. But in the future, I think this is a sneaky good play for her, as opposed to what the Sniper job offers, just in terms of how the AI is going to calculate its damage. Now, the TMR review, I actually genuinely really like this TMR. I love it just for the accuracy stat on it as a stat stick for an accessory. The buff itself of the 30 is also very nice, where given her as a ranged unit, or really any unit, they're not going to get dispelled as frequently or as often, so that accuracy of 30 is likely to have some good uptime. The CT of 100 for critical hits is actually really nice too. I will say it's not terribly broken, but it's certainly very good. I've played a lot with the Perrine TMR, which has a similar effect, and while it does obviously CT up have a tangible effect on turn order, it's not as oppressive as the 200 CT up that we're used to seeing, and right now where there's a lot of haste going on, this 100, while really good, is kind of competitive with what haste does as well. So I do still love this team art. End of the day, I love what it does statistically and ability wise. Now for the job-based vision card, this is where things get a little dicey. I think Sword Red Mage is basically the best pairing right now for Gun, which is fine because Sword Red Mage has some great tank options as a third potential unit. Other than that though, the rest of these jobs, they're kind of there, but they're not there yet. They really need just like one more vision card to really solidify some of these overlaps, which is why I think for now, if you're going double gunner, I think just going someone like Summer Resnick or Lucille or White Lotus Fino that don't require a lot of vision cards to make them do their jobs are probably the safest pick overall. And so this is getting there. But all it takes is one good vision card. Things change very quickly. Now for the unique equipment, I love her gun personally. It's the Human Killer, which does help her follow-up damage very much. The decreased AP consumption, also very nice. The all element res of 5%, a nice mitigation piece there too. And it's the minus 10% missile imperil, which, you know, debuff weakening does reduce that amount a little bit. And I really think this is best if you're putting someone into negative missile resistance. But still, I really love this for the accuracy stat too. And the Trial of Reckoning item, absolutely love this one. This is 25 of both kinds of chain resistance, but more than anything, not only is it the 10% physical damage increase, which does help her follow-up damage, but the range +1 also really important as a tool in your kit for managing her range. Now for the other general optimization, I think death penalty is the only other thing I'm considering for a weapon. The other equips, I think pretty standard. As a cloth unit, I don't really think there's anything here that like bulks her up. So for me, I'm either just going the accuracy angle with the Alex ring, the Moogle thing, as I have it in the title. I don't even know what you call it. The Genji glove is still a good option. The Espers, I think, are pretty straightforward. I think Odin and Dark Bahamut are the best just for the man killer or the attack percent up. I know Dark Bahamut also has magic resistance nodes on it, which is really great at the moment. Ultros does too, has the magic resistance nodes and the defense pen, which is another form of damage amplification for her. As for TMRs, I think just again for her, an agility TMR is perfect. Missile units don't always get 2 to 3 turns to buff because they have such extended range that you don't want to risk not having her use her second buff because she used a TMR instead. That would be a big loss, so I think it's fine with that. Now, some of my favorite teams, this is taken from the quick hit that I did. Light and Gun certainly are in a really good spot from like character selection perspective. Some of these other rainbow jobs, again, they're slowly being built out, but not quite there yet. Sword Red Mage certainly is probably the most compelling of them, but I do think Staff Devout can be too, and quite frankly, Greatsword and Sword Warrior are also, particularly because there's a lot of light units and dark units in this class, which Dark Bahamut really binds those elements together. So there is some versatility of where you might use her outside of the missile teams, but I will say that's probably my favorite team in the short term. I think her and Jaden with either Summer Resnick or Lucille are probably my favorite team at the moment. I think there's another really great quality here team with Cloud and Cypher, albeit very kill the enemy or lose. There's not a lot of self-sustain in this team, and so it's really just hoping that you just blow them away before they can beat you. Honestly, probably good for a lot of the duel mode stuff, but Guild War, maybe a little more limited. The bottom one here for me, I haven't really seen in practice a whole lot yet, but there is some overlap with Staff Devout. Exia does have a missile imperil on her main ability, so that helps both of their damage. I don't hate this team, but Exia is a little bit too squishy for me as a frontline unit, so I don't really know if this runs all that well in practice, but I think as long as you keep Yuna within Missile, Light, and Dark, I think you'll be just fine. Now for the Truststone recommendations, this is assuming her Tiny B gun. Left side, pretty standard. HP and Luck, and then 4 different status effects. I will say for Yuna, just because she's not going to get hit as often as most units, maybe you can drop some of the status elements for element resistance instead to help her survivability versus certain elements. We haven't seen that in quite a while because there's been so many status elements, but if Yuna's only going to on average take 2 to 3 hits, she's not getting hit as often as other units to really like incur those status effects on her. I don't believe in it all that strongly, but this is the first time in a while where I would actually consider it. And for me, the right side, it's either agility or accuracy. And I'm going with these 6 passives in particular myself. The attack, the defense pen, the light attack, the missile res pen of 10, the dexterity and crit rate, certainly really important for follow-up damage. I think there's a case to be made that you could go react block 20. I think the acquired AP of 20% is a little bit overkill because she does have some great innate AP management. Just from the Tiny B, she can restore AP on crit hits from her buff. There's a lot there already. You might entertain crit damage here, but we're going to enter a really high luck percent meta, which helps crit evasion in the upcoming time here. And so to me, I think crit damage is probably second fiddle to just dexterity and crit rate, which overall should have more impact as to how often you crit hit people. But that's the unit review altogether. This is a genuinely really awesome missile unit. Really just a great unit in general. Her teammate buff is absolutely exceptional. I think they chose the right element for her. I don't think there's anything that's broken or OP about her, but I do think that the utility of the haste removal and the CT nullification is exactly what this game needed at the moment. I think she's got some great future term use with what Riku and Venera are likely to bring as well. Overall, really happy with what they did for her. It's not exactly for how long we've kind of beat up how Gumi approaches missile units. While her and Jaden aren't perfect to what we would have hoped, I also don't think they're going to be, Alaya and Eliza levels of oppressive that we saw years ago with that missile meta, which I don't think was healthy for the game either. So I do think this is a very competitive angle they've taken at the moment that is absolutely going to be kind of a important team to field in the next couple of months, just based on that 1 month snapshot that we have currently. But we'll see what they do for maps in the future. We'll see what they do for gun vision cards in the future. We'll see what they do for elements in the future, if there's other light or dark units on the way, because certainly another dark unit could add in a different wrinkle to the team building component. There's a lot to like here, though. Very happy with her use so far that I've been using her. Good luck pulling her if you have not already, and if you have, love to hear your reaction so far. She's going to be great in a lot of these upcoming things, like even the 5v5 Grand Arena, where you can pepper in some of that extra follow-up damage. And that teammate buff is even better when you have, 2 to 4 people that potentially can apply it to. But that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Per usual, comments, critiques, questions, criticisms, all in the comment section below. I will have the Riku and the Pain character reviews up shortly as well. But thanks for watching for now. I'll talk to you all soon.